Here's why subject to existing mortgages should not be your main tool in creative financing. A lot of people, when they think of creative financing, especially nowadays, the big one that a lot of people are using that are familiar with what creative financing is subject to. Now, I'm a fan of subject to in certain regards, but personally, I don't use it that frequently. And I would almost even say I try to avoid it in many cases. There's a couple reasons for that, and I want to highlight those in this video and maybe open your eyes to why some other options in creative financing would be better suited depending on what your goals are. So let's take a look at subject to. Subject to is great if you maybe aren't going to be able to qualify for a mortgage, if you're trying to maybe target a market where people are having a hard time selling and a lot of new homeowners recently bought. Another thing that it's really good for, and this is actually one of the reasons where I would use it if this is a strategy you're interested in, is if you're able to take over a mortgage with a very good interest rate that no longer exists. Interest rates are going up right now. So in those kinds of instances, as an example for a start, that would be areas where subject to does come into its own and it works pretty well. It does also limit, because you have that, if you're doing Airbnb, then it's a bit higher, but Airbnb as a model, I think it's kind of dying right now. So let's just say that if you're looking to make modest income on each subject to that you do, and then you want to do a lot of them, it will take you a little while doing each of these deals to get that many subject twos to maybe create enough passive income to where you can live off of it. It's going to take you maybe more work to do that. And that's one of my gripes with subject to. Yes, you can get to a good spot, you can have a portfolio, you can have acquisitions. There are certain risks that come with subject to. So I want to talk about those briefly. If you do subject to, then you're probably already familiar with some of the big ones. So I think this would probably be a good point where I'm going to sidestep for just a second and make sure you know what subject to is. Subject to is where you're taking over an existing mortgage. So let's say somebody has a mortgage, maybe they can't make the payments anymore, they lost their job, sickness, whatever, and they're about to go into foreclosure. As an example, that might be one instance. And then you come along and say, you know what, instead of you going bankrupt, instead of you going in foreclosure, how about I make those payments? The mortgage will still stay in your name, but I'll make those mortgage payments. You'll transfer the title of the house over to me, but I'll make the payments for you. And that way your credit score stays intact, your credit history still looks good. You can even go and buy other houses. And in general, you're in a good spot as opposed to the latter, the other option, which is you go into foreclosure or bankruptcy. So that's kind of how it's a win-win, where on one hand, you're taking over a mortgage, ideally with good terms. You're getting a house, you can rent out that house or do whatever you want with it or live in it yourself. And at the same time, you're also helping out the seller. So that's kind of the plus. Now, what can happen is if the mortgage gets called because they see that you're making those payments for them and you transfer title, the mortgage company can see that and they'll say, well, actually, hold on a second, you're selling the property, so now we want our money. That doesn't happen that often if you're doing subject to correctly, but when it does, it can be a nasty little thing that can happen. And in those instances where that does occur, you may need to cough up the money, you may need to negotiate with the mortgage company. There are ways to get out of it. It's not necessarily a showstopper, but it can be one of those things that's in the back of your mind with all your subject to deals. Another gripe that I would say that I generally have with subject to is that you're doing a fair bit of work and the amount that you're making per house is still fairly modest. You are in some conditions doing quite a bit in terms of negotiating, explaining, building a relationship with the seller. And at the end of it, if you're seeing, $100, $200, $300 per deal, then you're doing pretty well. At the same time, you need to make sure that, for example, the actual seller continues to make their payments on time so that the house doesn't go into foreclosure, because remember, it stays in their name. So there is always that component where they need to be doing their part. So that's kind of another sort of angle that I also think about. But the biggest gripe of all that I have with subject to is that I just think that there's better ways where you can build up a portfolio, you can get to your goals, you can build cash flow, net worth in more efficient time-wise and money-wise ways than doing it with subject to. So I definitely think that if you're starting off, subject to might be a good tool to use, but otherwise in subject to, I prefer things like, for example, seller financing or working with OPM, other people's money, and creating deals. You can do much bigger deals when you do it that way. Especially if you know how to work with investors and things like that. Now, a question comes up, well, where do I find those investors? And we can go in that in a separate video if that's something you're interested in. Make sure you leave a comment, or if you have any questions, make sure you leave a comment and I can address those in a future video and actually cover those topics. We might do an FAQ video in a little bit here, because I do get a lot of questions when I do these videos. So generally, bottom line with this is that if you're aware of the other tools besides subject to, which is the one that's espoused quite a bit, then you'll realize that, well, actually you have much broader horizons when it's not just subject to that you're after. So in terms of not having to have a high credit score, not needing to be able to get a mortgage, you know, it being pluses that matter to you as being the main reasons you're doing subject to, you can use those same reasons for doing subject to for other avenues in creative financing to do bigger deals. Subject to it's going to be kind of hard to do, for example, portfolios where you can really blow up your portfolio in a short amount of time doing almost the same amount of work, or larger deals in general, maybe even commercial. Subject to is going to be a harder sell. So it does limit your ability to scale. Now, of course, you can build out systems. Of course, you can do this at scale and automate it and delegate it and, you know, systematize the crap out of it. But I kind of think that, well, if you're going to go through all that trouble, why not just do it with something that allow you to take down much bigger deals and build up your net worth and your cash flow much faster? And those are topics that we'll cover in future videos. If you enjoyed this video, then go ahead and make sure you leave a like so the algorithm knows that this is a video that's relevant. Also, please hit subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified about future videos if this is a topic that you're interested in. You know, building out your portfolio, your net worth, your cash flow in real estate. It also means a lot to me because it encourages me to make more videos like this, because I know they're videos that you guys want to watch. If you have any ideas for next videos, leave a comment below. And if in general you want to just get all of everything that you would need to actually start doing these kinds of deals the same way that I do them en masse, my students do them, then yes, I do have a course. I'm not going to pitch you super heavy on it, but if it is something that is something you're really serious about and you want to finally start doing bigger deals using creative financing without using a lot of money or any money, check out the link below. It's in the description and it'll cover how I'm doing it actively. Large deals, you know, scaling very quickly, which I'm very proud about, and you can see all that in the link. Check it out, have a click.